श्री स्वामीनारायण भगवाननी जय, अक्षर पुरुषोत्तम महाराजनी जय, प्रमुख स्वामी महाराजनी जय, महंत स्वामी महाराजनी जय, प्रमुख स्वामी महाराज शताब्दी महोत्सवनी जय. As we continue today's classes on Jivan Charitra Part 1, we're looking at pages 204 to 253. In the previous session, we left off at chapter E28, and we'll carry on from there, which is on page 229. Yogi Maharaj, during his vichran, during his travels, had arrived in the village of Banugar, and he had performed the foundation ceremony, the stone laying ceremony for a Mandir over there. And after the ceremony, he went ahead and made the announcement that the Mandir will be ready within an hour. And later that day, Yogi Maharaj then asked Gordhan Bhai Brahmbhat, a Haribhakt, to prepare a write-up regarding the offering of the land of the Mandir. Now, Gordhan Bhai had very little experience in preparing such formal notices. But as it was Yogi Bapa's Agna, he prepared a write-up. And then Yogi Maharaj asked him to read out the notice in public. And this is exactly what Gordhan Bhai read, that the entire congregation of Banugar has offered this land to Pujya Yogi Maharaj to build a Swaminarayan Mandir. And as soon as Yogi Bapa heard this, immediately Yogi Bapa spoke out and corrected him and said that Yogi Maharaj's name should not be there. The real heir to the throne, to the Gadi, is Pramukh Swami. Please write the name of Shastri Narayan Swarup Das Ji in the notice. And accordingly, the words of the write-up were then amended, and once the notice was then prepared, Yogi Maharaj also took the signatures of all the witnesses over there. Once again, we see Yogi Maharaj promoting Pramukh Swami Maharaj as the Pramukh of the Sanstha. Let's move on to E29. We've moved on to the year 1958. Now, Pramukh Swami Maharaj was in Ahmedabad at one time, and there was a sadhu by the name of Nilkant Swami. He was suffering from cancer. Previously, he had served in Makrana, but due to some serious illness, he was brought to Ahmedabad. And with the necessary treatment in Ahmedabad, his health had somewhat improved. However, Pramukh Swami Maharaj then felt that it's probably better to take him to Sarangpur, simply so that Nilkant Swami's requirements could be met properly and he could be looked after better in Sarangpur. And so Swami Shri then decided to take Nilkant Swami back to Sarangpur. Now, to support the ill in their need of time was something that was very innate of Pramukh Swami Maharaj. Anybody who would be ill, his heart would bleed and he would reach out to try and help them as much as possible. And he did this for Nilkant Swami. He took him to Sarangpur. Personally, Pramukh Swami Maharaj looked after all of Nilkant Swami's arrangements. And Nilkant Swami was very touched by all the care that was shown by Pramukh Swami Maharaj. Again, as a leader, he made sure he looked after all the santos as well at that time. Let's move on to E30. During the travels, sometimes Pramukh Swami Maharaj, he would go to smaller villages, he would go to big centers as well. Sometimes you'd have large congregations, sometimes there were just very minimal congregations. From Sarangpur, Pramukh Swami Maharaj went back to Ahmedabad, where he celebrated Makar Sankranti. And then from there, he went to Nainpur, Shrijipura, Shantipura, mainly to collect grains and rice grain in that area. It's the rice belt. And that's where he was collecting rice grains for the Sanstha. Now, during this vichran, on the 19th of January 1958, Pramukh Swami Maharaj was in Shrijipura, a very small town with just a handful of youth that had gathered over there in the Sunday assembly. But as I mentioned earlier, for Pramukh Swami Maharaj, it wasn't about numbers. That was never an issue. He was primarily focused on every single individual and their spiritual progress. And so despite it being a very small group, he wasn't affected because he carried on speaking and he inspired everybody to live a very satsang-centric life. So despite this hectic vichran and the travels that he had, he never pushed aside discourses. Like Katha-vartama kyare emne una pawa nathi didi. He carried on and made sure that Katha, discourses, Arti, all that, all Bhakti-related stuff, actions would carry on. Let's move on to E31. Pramukh Swami Maharaj celebrated the Vasant Panchami celebrations in Atladra. This is in January 25th of January 1958. Almost 8,000 Hari Bhaktas had attended the festival. And 2 days after this festival, Yogi Maharaj and Pramukh Swami Maharaj then came to the Mandir's Wadi, which is the farm, with about 125 sadhus and some Hari Bhaktas as well. This was going to be a special occasion. It was a little bit of a different occasion. Everybody was treated to fresh undiu, which was all the vegetables they got from the local farm as well. And they enjoyed chana, barley, pork, all these kind of things. With these actions that we see with Yogi Maharaj and Pramukh Swami Maharaj, they may appear very, very simple, but it really helped bond with the Hari Bhaktas and the Santos. And as a leader, it was very interesting the way Yogi Maharaj and Pramukh Swami Maharaj bonded so well with all the satsang, with all the Hari Bhaktas and the Santos in the satsang. It made it so much easier to communicate as well in satsang. Yogi Maharaj would often say, "Pehla het karta shikhu, pachi vaat bese." It just made it so much easier to do satsang. And this is something we see Bhagwan Swaminarayan also used to do very similar activities. We heard about the Loya Shakotsav, all these kind of activities that Bhagwan Swaminarayan would do. In that same manner, Yogi Maharaj and Pramukh Swami Maharaj, they carried on doing similar activities. Pramukh Swami Maharaj, after celebrating the festival in Atladra, then he traveled to a village called Thikaria, and then went to a village called Kelod. Now, a very interesting thing happened over here. We hear about Pramukh Swami Maharaj being called for inaugurations of big events and big monuments and things like that. But here was a very special event. It was the groundbreaking ceremony of a construction of a well. It was a simple well, but Pramukh Swami Maharaj, as I mentioned earlier, no action was too small or too big. It was his way of making sure that he pleased the Hari Bhaktas that he was serving. Pramukh Swami Maharaj often used to say, "In the joy of others lies our own." If it meant that performing the pujan of a small well would put a smile on someone's face, Pramukh Swami Maharaj was there. It also shows the love and affection that the Hari Bhaktas had for Pramukh Swami Maharaj and Yogi Maharaj, that even something seemingly so small, but to them it meant a huge blessing if the guru like Pramukh Swami Maharaj or Yogi Maharaj came to bless their projects. Pramukh Swami Maharaj then traveled from Karol, which is a very renowned sadhu of Gujarat, Sri Punit Maharaj. He had been staying there for 3 years, and as part of his retirement from worldly activities, and to this end, he commissioned an ashram to be made. Pramukh Swami Maharaj went there to visit the ashram, but it's very interesting that he made a small note in his diary, and he says that the ashram is very nice. The kitchen is always open to feed pilgrims. Very nice huts, like those of the rishis that used to stay in during the Vedic times, have also been built. Bhajans and kirtans were also performed. Anything nice that Pramukh Swami Maharaj had seen anywhere, he would make a very nice note of these things. And we could see that very instantly, Swami Shri made a note of this in his personal diary. Let's move on to E32. From Kerol, Pramukh Swami Maharaj then traveled to Choranda. And here he performed several house visits. He did some padramanis over there. The teachers in the village school, they wanted Pramukh Swami Maharaj to come to the school and bless all the pupils. So then it was natural. Pramukh Swami Maharaj's nature and personality was such that everybody would want to call him to their place. He understood the whole world to be his family. He didn't feel anybody was unfamiliar. It was all family for him. So the school teachers requested Pramukh Swami Maharaj to visit the school. And Swami Shri adjusted his schedule just to visit the school. He took time out, he spoke to all the students in the assembly, he blessed each and every individual student by patting them on their heads, and then he encouraged all the teachers, encouraging them to all lead a noble life, to set an example for all the students as well, and then eventually encourage them to teach all the students as if they were their own children. This was something, again, a very sincere way in which Pramukh Swami Maharaj conducted himself, and he would share this with other people as well. Let's move on to E33. Pramukh Swami Maharaj was in the village of Choranda, and that's where he received news about a disagreement between two sevaks that were living in Bochasan, in the Mandir in Bochasan. And the situation had escalated pretty far and had become very, very serious. Yogiji Maharaj was very worried about this, and immediately he asked Pramukh Swami Maharaj to see if he could go to Bochasan and resolve this matter. Now, because it was Yogi Bapa's wish, Pramukh Swami Maharaj stopped everything because he was in the middle of his very hectic Vichran. He stopped all that and went to Bochasan just to make sure he could help resolve this issue. As soon as he got to Bochasan, he took time out, met both the individuals, spoke to them individually, understood the situation, and then very amicably resolved the issue. Now, this was something that we've noticed throughout Pramukh Swami Maharaj's life. Conflict resolution. This was something that Swami was a master at. Whenever two people had a fallout, two villages would have a fallout, two groups would have a fallout, Pramukh Swami Maharaj was always there to make sure that he could mend the relationship and make sure, in the spirit of Samp, Surat Bhav and Ekta, he made sure that he would unify these two people. Basically, Pramukh Swami Maharaj spoke to both of them, and as a mark of to resolve the issue, he sent one of the individuals to a Mandir in Bochasan and the other one to Atladra. So he split the two individuals and made sure that they were both also happy. And so it was resolved very amicably. This was something very unique that Pramukh Swami Maharaj had. Interestingly enough, he also made a note of this in his diary. So on the 8th of February 1958, Pramukh Swami Maharaj writes in his diary, Puja Yogiji Maharaj's blessings and immense power meant that the Sevaks happily went to Atladra to serve. It's very interesting how Pramukh Swami Maharaj mentions Yogiji Maharaj's blessings and immense power. It was Pramukh Swami Maharaj who went there to resolve the issue. Yet in his diary, he notes down and gives all the credit to his Guru, Yogiji Maharaj. We can see the Guru Bhakti. Throughout his life, everything that he had achieved, he always gave his credit, all the credit to his Guru, Yogiji Maharaj and Shastriji Maharaj. Pramukh Swami Maharaj then eventually met Yogiji Maharaj in a station, Miyagam station. And Pramukh Swami Maharaj, as soon as he saw Yogiji Maharaj, he offered his danvats to Yogiji Maharaj. And Yogiji Maharaj did the same to Pramukh Swami Maharaj as well. Interestingly enough, we could see both Guru and Shishya doing danvats to each other as a mark of respect to each other. Yogiji Maharaj was so happy with the result, he embraced Pramukh Swami Maharaj as an expression of his satisfaction. Let's move on to E34, which is page 234. Yogiji Maharaj was in a village called Adwal. This is a very nice incident involving our Guru Hari Puja Mahan Sai Maharaj. While Yogiji Maharaj was in Adwal, he received a letter informing him that Pramukh Sai Maharaj was going to travel to Ahmedabad via train. And so en route, there was a station, Raika station, which was very close to where Yogiji Maharaj was in Adwal. So immediately Yogiji Maharaj then instructed Vinu Bhagat and Shankar Bhagat, Vinu Bhagat meaning Puja Mahan Sai Maharaj, to take some water to Raika station for Pramukh Swami Maharaj. And there was a darbar over there, Dilawar Singh. He offered his horse cart and requested the two Bhagats to sit into it. But Yogiji Maharaj then replied saying, look, I can go if I wanted to do that. I can go in that manner too. But in the old days, we always used to walk and go there. So Bailuba then mentioned that Swami, it's very, very hot. And he suggested that, it's good if the Parshads would take an umbrella with them to cover their heads. Yogiji Maharaj then again replied, they have a pot of water on their heads. The water will remain cool in the pot and they won't feel the heat. So again, then the devotees requested that Yogi Baba at least let them wear some footwear or shoes or something on their feet. And Yogi Baba goes, no, don't worry, nothing will happen. They will return in good shape. Puja Mahan Sai Maharaj has often recounted this incident, and there's always a smile every time he would remember this prasang. Vinu Bhagat and Shankar Bhagat eventually walked all the way to Raika station, barefoot, in the heat, carrying the pot of water. The Santos had once asked Puja Mahan Sai Maharaj, did you have to wear a pag? And Mahan Sai Maharaj says, yes, we had to wear our pag. Then they asked him a question, who carried the pot? Was it you or Shankar Bhagat? And very modestly, Puja Mahan Sai Maharaj said it was him who carried the pot all the way to the station. Unfortunately, as soon as they got to the station, due to the certain circumstances, Pramukh Sai Maharaj hadn't been able to board the train. So they had to go there and come back the same way. And Yogiji Maharaj's instructions were not to pour the water away. So they had to come back with a full pot of water back with them. They asked Puja Mahan Sai Maharaj that, Swami, didn't you feel like just pouring the water away so you didn't have to carry that weight? But Mahan Sai Maharaj then responded saying it was Yogi Bapa's agna to bring back the water. So we brought all the water back to us, with us. But we noticed the care that Yogiji Maharaj had, that when he heard that Pramukh Sai Maharaj was coming, immediately he instructed Puja Mahan Sai Maharaj Vinu Bhagat to go there to the station. But we also notice, interestingly, Puja Mahan Sai Maharaj in the way he followed Yogiji Maharaj's Agna with a smile on his face. Let's move on to E35. During their travels, Pramukh Swami Maharaj was traveling with Yogiji Maharaj. They arrived late in a village called Varsoda. The villagers were very, very excited to have Yogiji Maharaj and Pramukh Swami Maharaj in their village, and they all arranged an incredible welcome for both Yogiji Maharaj and Pramukh Swami Maharaj. But the time was 1 a.m., so it was very late at night that Swami had arrived. Again, a huge expression of the love and affection that the Hari Bhaktas had for their Guru, Yogiji Maharaj, and for Pramukh Swami Maharaj. A very small room had been arranged in the Mandir where Yogiji Maharaj and Mota Swami could rest. Pramukh Swami Maharaj and the other sadhus and some of the youth, they slept outside in the hall. And Swamiji, he lay on a very dusty mattress which he had covered with an orange sheet. But he ended up staying awake all night and the next afternoon, because every time somebody walked into the campus and if they were making a bit of noise or anything, immediately Pramukh Swami Maharaj would sit up and gesture everybody to remain silent. He must have woken up almost 15 times throughout the session, just indicating people to remain quiet because Yogi Bapa was resting, because Mota Swami was also resting. But again, just to make sure that Yogiji Maharaj wasn't inconvenienced in any way, Pramukh Swami Maharaj went to these lengths. We could see a true sevak in the life of Pramukh Swami Maharaj. And from Varsoda, Pramukh Swami Maharaj visited many villages and cities, and eventually they arrived in Mumbai on the 10th of August. Yogi Bapa was also present over there. Pramukh Swami Maharaj there performed a parayan on the second chapter of the Satsang Jivan. Let's move on to E36. During their vichurans once, while Yogiji Maharaj was in Gadada, one evening, a sadhu who was very much involved in the work in Gadada, in the construction of Gadada, had a complaint about Pramukh Swami Maharaj. And so he went ahead and spoke about Pramukh Swami Maharaj and complained and spoke very negatively about Pramukh Swami Maharaj. Yogiji Maharaj immediately stopped him and said, "Look, promise me not to ever speak ill of Pramukh Swami Maharaj. Say whatever you want to about me, but never say anything like this about Pramukh Swami Maharaj." And the following day, the sadhu who had an issue or who had a complaint figured out that maybe I should go and speak to somebody else. So then he went and spoke to Vinu Bhagat. Now Vinu Bhagat, again, Puja Mahan Sai Maharaj. As soon as Vinu Bhagat heard about this, he informed Yogiji Maharaj. Again, Yogiji Maharaj called that sadhu privately and explained to him, saying, "Look, Pramukh Swami Maharaj is not at fault at all. You should not say such things about Pramukh Swami Maharaj. Shastriji Maharaj has appointed him. He is so spiritually great, and whatever work you have, make sure you speak to him and only him. Don't speak to anybody else. If you have any issues, go and speak to Pramukh Swami Maharaj." And then Yogiji Maharaj added on, saying to that son that, "Look, you're very intelligent. It's very easy for you to understand such things. Make sure you please Pramukh Swami Maharaj. Pramukh Swami Maharaj ne raji karjo." Yogiji Maharaj's words were so powerful, they touched the sadhu's heart, and he begged for forgiveness and then reassured Yogiji Maharaj that I will never ever think ill of Pramukh Swami Maharaj again. If anyone ever spoke ill of Pramukh Swami Maharaj, Yogiji Maharaj would always make sure that he explained and he steered them onto the right path. Naturally, because Pramukh Swami Maharaj was the leader, sometimes people would not always have an agreement, and so they had to find somewhere else, and they would go and talk to Yogi Bapa. But Yogi Bapa would always explain to them and correct them and explain the Mahima of Pramukh Swami Maharaj. Let's move on to E37. The year is 1959, and we're looking at pages 236 to 237. Now, on the 16th of January 1959, the foundation ceremony for the new Mandir in Ahmedabad had taken place in the presence of Yogiji Maharaj and Pramukh Swami Maharaj. So this was 1959, the foundation ceremony for the Mandir in Ahmedabad. Later that year, Yogiji Maharaj was scheduled to travel abroad to the second tour to East Africa. This would have been his second tour abroad. Mandirs in Kampala, Jinja and Tororo were now ready, and the local Hari Bhaktas had sent invitations for the Mandir Pratishtas. Yogiji Maharaj informed Pramukh Swami Maharaj that he wanted to take Pramukh Swami Maharaj on this Vichran tour. Pramukh Swami Maharaj very politely explained to Yogiji Maharaj, "Swami, it's best if you go. You carry on with the tour over there. I will stay over here because there's a lot of other work that we need to do over here." And Yogiji Maharaj then explained to Pramukh Swami Maharaj and requested him that it would be nice if you could join us on the tour. We want to take you on the tour with us. I'd like to introduce you to all the devotees. After all, you are the president, you are the Pramukh, and it's important that everybody knows that you are the Pramukh of the Sanstha. And so Yogi Baba was very keen to take Pramukh Swami Maharaj on this Vicharan tour, to which Pramukh Swami Maharaj also agreed. And in the month of October, they made their way to Mumbai. Let's move on to E38. So on the 23rd of October 1959, Yogiji Maharaj and Pramukh Swami Maharaj were in Mumbai. It was around 11:45 p.m., the night before departing for the foreign tour. And on that occasion, while everything was running around, everybody's running around busy preparing for the next day, a group of youths approached Pramukh Swami Maharaj and requested to have a meeting with him, just to sit and have some inspirational talks. Now, it was a very busy time for Pramukh Swami Maharaj because he had to finish off winding up all the activities over here before the tour. Yet, he took his time out, agreed to their request, and sat with the yuvaks that whole late till night that night. And again, very typical of Pramukh Swami Maharaj. He didn't look at the clock, just accommodated to this request, and he pleased the yuvaks as well. But what he spoke to them about was also very interesting. He spoke to them about not getting trapped by Maya. He spoke to them about the importance of Upasana and how Shastriji Maharaj had propagated this true Upasana according to the scriptures. And then to ensure that this foundation of this Upasana remained firm in their lives, he made sure that they also carried on, and he told them to make sure that the Upasana remained firm in their lives. Also told them to ensure that they keep good company. And in an inspiring way, he started talking to them about what it's like to become a sadhu. And then Swami said one very nice thing. Pramukh Swami Maharaj spoke to them. He encouraged them about the life of what it's like to be a sadhu. And Swami goes on to say that Yogiji Maharaj wants to give all of you immense happiness. Those of you who are willing to do so should harbor the desire to become a sadhu. Now he's encouraging them to become a sadhu. There is no difficulty or physical obstacle in this seva. There is no misery. With his grace, there is constant peace and happiness. If you become part of his wish, then many educated youths, both here and abroad, will be able to spread satsang. Set aside the weakness of your mind and become part of his wish. Is there not misery in this world? Here, there is no misery. I give you that guarantee. Pramukh Swami Maharaj is guaranteeing them that if you become a sadhu, there is no misery here. And then he pointed, look, this Vinu Bhagat has been traveling with Swami for 3 years. He used Mahant Sai Maharaj, Pujya Vinu Bhagat, as an example, that he's been traveling with Swami for the last 3 years. Ask him if there's any misery here. And due to the weakness of our minds, discouraging thoughts will often arise. So Pramukh Swami Maharaj is encouraging them to the path of becoming a sadhu. It was Yogi Baba's intense wish that educated youths do become sadhus. And Swami Shri very affectionately inspired all of them to become part of his Guru's wish. Let's move on to E39. Accompanying Yogiji Maharaj on the 24th of October 1959, they left from the Santa Cruz airport in Mumbai. Swami Shri was to set foot on foreign land for the very first time. This was his first international trip, 24th of October 1959. The plane had a brief stopover in Aden for about 45 minutes before landing in Nairobi, Kenya. The day after landing in Nairobi, the group was then to travel to Tororo, and on the way they stopped over in Naivasha, Nakuru and Eldoret. Once they got to Tororo, Swami Shri also offered his respects at Sri Magan Bhai's memorial shrine. He then visited other centers and eventually arrived in Kampala. Let's go on to E40. So for the past 30 years, Yogiji Maharaj had celebrated the festivals of Diwali and Ankut in Gondar. This was the first time that both festivals were going to be celebrated in Kampala. So the date is 31st of October and the 1st of November 1959. There's no need to remember these dates. It's just for our references as well. And on the day of Labh Pancham, they made their way to Masaka. They stopped over at the exact line of the equator. So again, another memorable thing that on the line of the equator, they stopped there. There are many pictures of Pramukh Swami Maharaj and Yogiji Maharaj in the future travels where they took pictures over there as well. On the way to Tororo, Swami Shri also visited Owen Falls and Jinja, and at the scenic spot of Lake Victoria in Majanji with Yogiji Maharaj. They even bathed Thakurji in the falls and in the lake. Swami Shri then arrived in the city of Mwanza, which is in Tanzania. So now the travels are more in Tanzania. Devotees and well-wishers would attend in large numbers to these congregations and these gatherings. But during these occasions, Yogiji Maharaj would often ask Pramukh Swami Maharaj and Sant Vallabh Swami, Sant Swami, to speak and address the assembly. And Yogiji Maharaj would often make the announcements himself that now the president of the Sanstha, Narayan Swarup Swami or Narayan Swami, will speak. Please listen carefully. Swamiji would always end up speaking. Pramukh Swami Maharaj would often remember this and often talk about this. Remembering these memories from this tour, Pramukh Swami Maharaj would often say that initially, I hardly used to speak. We used to do seva, but Jogi Bapa would insist that I speak. And when we went to Africa, this increased a lot. And since then, I was able to speak much more freely. Previously, Pramukh Swami Maharaj would conduct parayans. We've heard about Pramukh Swami Maharaj doing many parayans in the past. But mainly what was involved in this, he would recite the shloks and then the translation. So that was how the parayan was conducted back in the day. But after this whole tour in Africa, Pramukh Swami Maharaj was much more freer and he began to speak much more freely. Because Pramukh Swami Maharaj's personality was rather quiet. But he would say that after this Vicharan, Swamiji made me much more talkative. After the Sabha, Yogiji Maharaj would compliment Pramukh Swami Maharaj that Pramukh Swami Maharaj spoke very, very well. This is a new country, so we want to leave an impact. In that way, all will remember what has been spoken about. Yogiji Maharaj often also encouraged Vinu Bhagat. And he would say in a very loving and a very jokeful way to Vinu Bhagat, Vinu Bhagat, you should also speak. Speak loudly, not timidly. Pujaman Sai Maharaj, even today we know he has a very gentle and a very soft voice. But Yogiji Maharaj would very, in a joking way, encourage Vinu Bhagat to also speak in the Sabha as well. Now, while they were in Mwanza, a Bhagavad Parayan had been arranged at the Lakshmi Narayan Mandir in Mwanza. And Pramukh Swami Maharaj would speak there every morning. From Mwanza, then they went to Tabora. Yogiji Maharaj and Pramukh Swami Maharaj were there for 4 days. And they did Katha and Padramnis in the small village. Now, it was a very small town, Tabora. But everybody was so touched by the home visits, by the Padramnis, because Yogiji Maharaj and Pramukh Swami Maharaj would take a very deep interest in the lives of all the Hari Bhaktas, and he would encourage them to progress on the path of satsang. And this left a very deep impact in everyone's lives, in all the Hari Bhaktas that they visited. They had also visited the diamond mines that were in Shinyaga. Pramukh Swami Maharaj would remember his friend Hakabhai. And once in a conversation with Yogiji Maharaj, he very jokingly said that, you know what, I need to write a letter to Hakabhai saying that we have seen all these diamond mines. It was just a very in-house joke between him and Hakka Khachar. And Yogiji Maharaj would also make fun of this and join in the conversation. And he would say, yes, you must write this. Yes, we've, વાયરો લીધો છે, પરંતુ એ કઈ diamonds હજી આવ્યા નથી. We can feel the breeze, but we haven't had any diamonds come to, no diamond has been found yet. But again, this was a lot of banter between Yogiji Maharaj, Pramukh Swami Maharaj and Hakka Khachar. Let's move on to E42. From Mwanza, they went eventually to Dar es Salaam. They spent about 15 days in Dar es Salaam. And then from there, they went to Zanzibar and eventually came to Arusha. Now, reminiscing on an incident from Moshi, Pramukh Swami Maharaj would often talk about how while they were in Moshi, they were staying at Rauji Bhai's house. And from his house, they could see Mount Kilimanjaro. Pramukh Swami Maharaj says that while sitting to do my daily puja, I could directly see Mount Kilimanjaro from the window. And this says a lot about Pramukh Swami Maharaj, the way he also enjoyed a lot about just being in a natural setting, natural environment. Pramukh Swami Maharaj was very keen on those kind of things. But he reminisced on this and talked about how while he was doing his puja, he could see Mount Kilimanjaro. Pramukh Swami Maharaj eventually, they got to Nairobi to celebrate the festival of Uttarayan. That was the 14th of January, 1960. And after the celebrations of Uttarayan, the group eventually came to Kampala. Let's move on to E43. Now, the main purpose of Yogiji Maharaj's visit to Africa was for the Murti Pratishtha of the 3 mandirs in Uganda, namely Kampala, Jinja and Tororo. The Murti Pratishtha at Kampala took place on the 21st of January 1960. Almost 10,000 people took labh of this occasion. It included a yagna, a shobha yatra, a nagar yatra, as well as the Pratishtha. From there, the Pratishtha in Jinja took place on the 1st of February 1960. Almost 6,000 people attended this event as well. The Kalash is the the Kalash were placed on the shikhars, on the shikhars of the Akshar Purushottam Mandir, just while Thakurji also took a place in the Mandir as well. During their stay in Jinja, Yogiji Maharaj and Pramukh Swami Maharaj also bathed in the river Nile. Finally, the Pratishtha of the Mandir in Tororo took place on the 22nd of February 1960 with over 4,000 people in attendance. And on the day before the Pratishtha, Yogiji Maharaj also installed the holy footprints of Sriji Maharaj at the memorial place of Sri Magan Bhai, who was a very pioneer Hari Bhakta in the Satsang of Africa. We will end today's session over here. Shri Swaminarayan Bhagwan Ni Jai.